or you could read it as nasab. So both ways are
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. So you can hear me, brothers? Yeah. So today I thought I would cover a new topic, Islam and politics, and and how Islam views politics and how it constitutes rulership. Okay, so and questions maybe that can be answered today is Islam compatible with democracy, and what is the role of an Islamic state? So these are things that you get asked quite regularly as well. When it comes to politics, does Islam allow you to choose your leader? Does Islam allow you to have a point of view how to rule a state as a common person? And of course, the Messenger ﷺ, many years of his life, especially at the end, he was a state ruler. So from his Sunnah we can derive how Islam views rulership and how it views politics. Okay. This slide will be a bit, I think, a bit complicated. I'm going to read what's on the slides and try and explain it. So please, if you have any questions, let me know. Islam and polity. Islam and politics. So the relationship between religion and polity in Muslim societies has been a focus of debate among scholars of Islam. So from very, very early on, Ulama of Islam debated and talked about the responsibilities of those who have leadership, and whether and what are their rights and what are they asked for by Islam to carry out. Okay, so this is a topic that's been talked about for a long, long time. Some Muslims, they view Islam as simply a religion between you and your Creator, and how you live your life and how you conduct yourself with the creation, and they just limit it to that. They limit it to only the affairs between creation on a personal level, rather than a societal level. Others, however, they view Islam as not only a religion, but also a system, okay, and a social order which takes into account all aspects of human life, which includes the state and law. And many groups you might have heard of, like Hizb ut-Tahrir and the Muslim Brotherhood, their main focus is that. So the first category of Muslims could be Jama'at al-Tabligh, who very much focus on the relationship between you and Allah, and how you can improve yourself. By improving yourself, Allah will improve the condition of the human being. And Allah will facilitate our affairs by just doing our namazes on time, prayers, getting the tasbih done, making dua, fulfilling the work of da'wah. They will claim that if you do this, then this goes a long way in establishing justice and order in a society. Other groups, like I said, the Muslim Brotherhood, they would claim differently. They will say, okay, that's part of life, but that's not everything. And to be fair on Jama'at Tabligh, they wouldn't argue that what they say and what they teach is the whole Islam. They say these 6 points are what the minimum of what will help a Muslim practice his whole religion. But generally, the Hizb al-Tahrir, for example, they will claim that a khilafah is the only solution to the problems of the ummah. That the ummah has no real leadership. So to protect Muslims and to fulfill their interests, you must have one ruler that dictates and can defend Muslim lands, etc. Okay. And I guess what we've seen from yesterday in New Zealand, that could be quite relevant. If Muslims are stuck in non-Muslim states, they must have some sort of rulership in themselves. If the current Muslim rulers are not following or not practicing upon the hukum or the rule of Allah, then their argument can be quite strong. That Muslims need an area, fortified area, where they can live their life according to Sharia without danger. Yeah, so these are two aspects of Muslim views, and when you go out and you meet Muslims, they might argue both. They argue both ways. So and Salafis as well, especially I don't know, you brothers are aware of the Madkhali sect of Salafis, and they would argue that you do not speak about politics at all. As a common person, if you're not in politics, it has nothing to do with you. So just focus on your relationship with Allah and improving things like Tawheed and etc. And they say that you cannot criticize the government, nor should you even have a say. So this is again another aspect that you'll meet some Muslims like that who will say democracy, etc. These are irrelevant to us. Okay, the state that we have at the moment is good enough. But again, you'll get other movements. I'm not aware of Da'wat al-Islam. What's the party in Bangladesh? Are you brothers aware? That's quite politically active. I forgot its name. But anyway, they will claim differently. They will say no. Islam has to be. You have to establish Islam through politics, and that's how you can facilitate an Islamic society. Okay. So yeah, Brother Mirza, welcome. So today we're talking about Islam and politics, polity. Okay, that's another word for politics. So we're talking about. No worries. We're just talking whether democracy can ever be compatible. Western democracy can it be compatible with Islamic teachings? Okay, and how the Sharia wants us to live our life. So we'll discuss that inshallah later on. So politically active Muslims, they will claim that. Yeah, so Hizb al-Tahrir, an example of a group, a movement which encourages the creation of a khilafah, like Hizb al-Tahrir, they will claim events like what happened in New Zealand yesterday, that you need an Islamic state, an Islamic rulership with one leader that dictates to the ummah what the rules are to protect Muslims. And they will argue that Muslims who live in non-Muslim lands are susceptible to danger of non-Muslim killings, etc. And they claim the only reason Muslims would migrate to non-Muslim lands is because of economic reasons, and the failure of Muslim states right now. And if you had a khilafah, they would say that Muslims would live there, fulfill their Muslim Islamic obligations with no problem. So that's what I was referring to. Yeah, Hizb al-Tahrir. Look, I know I don't want to get bogged down in these groups, but it's relevant to this discussion, I guess. Hizb al-Tahrir has, like any group within Muslims, they would have what we consider to be right and what we might differ with them. The point isn't to destroy them completely if you differ with them. The point is to discuss. Because all these groups, whether that's tabligh, whether all, even for madhabs of fiqh, they're all based on ijtihad, human understanding of text. So you said you spent 4 years with Hizb al-Tahrir. Yeah, Hizb al-Tahrir have many good things. I mean, they're concerned about the ummah, leadership of the ummah, uniting the ummah, bringing justice to the ummah, fulfilling the work of da'wah to non-Muslims. They have great things, no doubt. But I think what they lack, for me anyway, and they will differ with me if I meet one of them, I'm sure. But just to me, what they seem to lack a spiritual side, which many Muslims, when they join, they leave quite quickly. Especially Muslims who are interested with a deep connection with Allah or with the Prophet, they tend to be a bit shallow when it comes to those issues. And people go to Jama'at Tabligh and they find those connections, but they think, it has no political relevance. It's just people staying in the mosque and not really having any real effect on the world. And Tablighis will say, no, we are having an effect on the world, but obviously not practically. So people might move into Hizb al-Tahrir after Tabligh. And people find, I mean, obviously Hizb al-Tahrir has people that do follow the Sunnah, and they do follow some sort of path of spirituality. We can't, and I'm sure it teaches that. But generally, that's what people find when they join groups like that. And I'm sure it's the inconvenience and the lack of practice of its members rather than what it teaches. Because I think every group in Muslims would want good, for whether spiritual, political. So that's what I mean. What's your opinion regarding the Khilafat movement? Do you think? Again, Khilafah, will come to that. And what's the system of rule in Islam? Is it democracy? Is it Khilafah? Is it dictatorship? What is it? And we'll come to that, inshallah. But I hope that whatever group we decide to align ourselves in, there's nothing wrong. But as long as we don't have what we call ta'assub, which is my way or the highway, there's no other way, and we don't, we can maybe criticize other Muslims, but we don't go in an extreme, and we recognize what's good, and we recognize that we're all on the path of ijtihad, and we're trying our best to understand what the Quran and Sunnah is telling us. Okay, so the best thing is if we don't like a group, we just say what's wrong and mention what's good as well, and that's the only way we can bring some unity to the ummah. Otherwise, if we're just gonna slag every group off, it just won't ever work. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, back to the introduction. What do I think regarding the Khilafah? As I said, I'll talk about that inshallah later on. Yeah, so they base their argument, the Hizb al-Tahrir, people like Hizb al-Tahrir, I'm not focused on them, there's many groups like them. They would say that the Quran mentions quite clearly that leadership is important, that ownership, kingship is relevant. Like, Tabaraka alladhi biyadihi al-mulk, glory be to the one who in his hands has domination. So Allah is Malik, He is the owner, so He has leadership. Okay, He is the owner of the universe. Allah mentions the word ummah, inna hadhihi ummatukum, this is your ummah, one ummah. Okay, so this is again a relevant verse in the Quran which seems to suggest unity within nations, within tribes, within people. And other political connotations, hukum, rulership is mentioned in the Quran. Allah is just. Allah will judge. You need some sort of leadership in a society for society to flourish and succeed. So that people like Hizb al-Tahrir, they would use these arguments. They will say the Quran is filled with arguments like this. So to apply it to us is very relevant. Okay. For example, the Arabic word sultan, which is repeatedly mentioned in the Quran, is an abstract noun meaning authority. It means authority, it means rulership. And it was used when we talk about sultan, we mean the ruler traditionally. And when scholars mention the word sultan, they mean ruler. So again, this is showing that politics is relevant to Islam. This is what I'm trying to show from this first slide. Similarly, the term hukum, to govern and to judge, and its derivations such as governor, ruler, judge, appear in the Quran. They appear many, many times in the Quran. وَأَنُحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهِ. You know, Allah is telling the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, rule over them by what Allah has revealed to you. It's very relevant. And again, appear in the Quran explicitly more than 250 times, each with political connotation. So politics is relevant to Muslims. Okay. For example, the Quran says that when I'm mentioning in this slide, in these slides, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because I've made this slide up for non-Muslims in the hope that I'll forward it to them and they can understand it better. So if I say Muhammad, I'm not disrespecting the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam by mentioning his name without sending salat on him, but I intend this to be sent to non-Muslims. I hope you brothers understand. Okay. And they can relate better if the name is mentioned without the prophet, because they don't believe he's a prophet, so they can relate to it much easier. So Allah says, we have revealed to you the book with truth, so that you may judge among people by that which Allah has shown to you. And the Messenger of Allah was ordered to judge between people according to how Allah taught him. So again, this suggests in Islam there must be authority. There must be some sort of leadership and rulership. Okay. Again, Islam and politics continued. Dawood alayhi salam and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam were both leaders. They were both political state leaders, and they were judges by virtue. Okay, Allah made them judges. Allah made them rulers. Hence, they possessed complete power. They had power to judge according to however they wanted. However, this command for them does not mean that they judge and rule on the basis of their own wishes. So, okay, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given ability to judge, but not to judge according to how he wanted to, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but according to how Allah wanted him to. Because everyone is obeyed to follow the Sharia, even the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, Allah says to him, "Follow what I have revealed to you." Okay, and of course, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam will never go against Allah. This is a reminder that Sharia is over all things. Their rule must be based on the text. Yeah, so if Dawood alayhi salam was to judge between two people, he would judge according to his revelation, not according to his personal preference or personal opinion. That is for Islam a text of the Quran. So for Muslims, we judge according to the Quran. Okay, this is a fundamental aspect that we might differ with non-Muslims on. The relation between religion and society is not confined to what is commonly termed rituals. Okay, so the relationship between a Muslim and the society he lives in is not on prayer or Hajj or Ramadan. These are very personal things. And there's nothing in society which makes you fulfill these obligations. Okay, nothing in society is telling you that you have to be doing the Hajj, you have to be doing the prayers. Okay, these are things that are between you and Allah. But when it comes to public actions, the things that affect other creations of Allah, then there must be governance. Okay, there must be a law between human affairs, and etc. Okay. Trying to skip over that. Islamic law does not separate religion from daily life. Yeah, Islamic law does not separate religion. So when people say, when we teach non-Muslims, we say Islam is a way of life. That's what we say, because as we know, Islam, every step you take is dictated by if you want to go to the bathroom, if you want to eat, if you want to sleep. These are all dictated by Sharia and how you're supposed to do it through the teachings of the Messenger. So it does not say. So if it's telling you how to sleep and use the bathroom, then surely it's going to tell you about the highest places in society, which is rulership. Surely, okay. So it does not separate religion from politics, and this is one of the disasters of the modern time. Many Muslims now certainly in the Arab world, they want to separate religion from politics. They say Islam is for the mosque, you practice it, but it has nothing to do with rulership. And unfortunately, it comes from Muslim misunderstanding their religion. And in some aspects, it touches even issues of aqidah. So, and you'll find that very common now. Just open secularists who say we do not want religion practiced on a political level at all. And an example of secularists in the Muslim world fighting this aspect of Islam and politics is what happened in Egypt, which is a relevant issue. No, it's fine. Yeah, so Islam was spread in many ways. To say that Islam was only spread peacefully and through traders in Malaysia and Indonesia by just their good akhlaq and good behavior would be, if we to say that's the only way Islam was spread, that would be dishonest. Okay, Islam was spread through, in some ways, by just Muslims wanted to occupy other people's land. Andalusia was a good example. Muslims just entered southern Spain and took over. So that's Islam spread through Spain through that. Whether you want to call it through the sword or whatever, but that's a reality. And Islam was spread politically as well. So there's different ways of how Islam was spread. But when coming back to, but anyway, any questions, just feel free. I'll try and answer as best as I can. But when it comes to religion and politics, if we look at Egypt in 2013, what happened? What happened? There was a Muslim Brotherhood who's some sort of an Islamic government. Okay, it was fairly elected. No issues, no rigging, nothing in 2012, and they were given rulership. But what happened? A year later, the secularists like Sisi took it over. Okay, the military dictator who rules Egypt now, Abdul Sisi. And he argued, we didn't need Islam. These people are just using Islam for their own gain. They're using Islam to rule over us, to tell you what's right and wrong, because Muslims are emotional to their religion. And then what he did, Sisi, was he brought up these scholars who now dictate, who go on these Egyptian channels all the time, and really brainwash people and tell them, there's nothing to do. Islam has nothing to do with religion. The Muslim Brotherhood were just trying to get into power because of religion. And you'll find that widespread even in the Azhar. There's many scholars who teach that, and if you teach otherwise, you'll get arrested. So it's a very relevant issue, whether Islam and politics should mix or not. So Islam doesn't separate politics from morals either. Morals from the state. The state should teach some sort of morals to its people. Okay? Islam is a system for practical human life in all its aspects. Okay, Islam professes an ideal and convincing concept that expands the relationship between Allah and His creation, the universe and mankind. So, what we mean by politics is Islam it dictates. Okay, this is how you should treat your wife if you're married. This is how you should treat your children. This is how you should treat your neighbor. This is how you should treat your teachers, your classmates. So Islam also has an aspect of teaching how to rule over a people. There's no doubt about that. Okay? And Muslims now want to just take that away and say that's irrelevant, which is very strange. So Islam teaches the relationship between a human and every other aspects of life. It includes the doctrines and practical organizations that emanate, from and depend upon this ideal and make it of a reality reflecting upon it everyday life of human beings. So Islam is, as I said, very simply, is dictated to human beings how their creator wants them to live, and that includes how he wants them to rule. Given that the Islamic conception of life is that of coordination and harmonization between the body and the soul, it is only reasonable to expect that a very close relationship should have been established between religion and politics, because between the mosque and the government. So Islam is teaching your body has a right, your soul has a right, and one of the rights of the body is rulership. Your physical aspect is to be ruled. So Islam covers that extensively. Religious activity involves the whole person and social group. So the reality of rulership is relevant because you are as a human being, you are mixing with others all the time, and you are part of a society, and you are part of some sort of following. So you cannot say that you are special and that you are independent. No, you're part of a social group. But Islam deals with fullness of humanity as it exists in reality, not treating humanity as an. So Islam is teaching the realities of being a human being, that you do have desires, that you do have shortcomings, that you do have needs that need to be fulfilled. Eating, drinking, companionship. These are things that you need as a human. So Islam is not teaching humanity in its theory. In a theoretical sense, it's teaching it on a practical level. Politics is one of what Islam is talking about. It's not idealism, meaning trying to create a utopia like communism tried to do. When let's make everybody equal, and that will make everyone better, and that will make society equal, and that will make society flourish. There will be no more discrimination. Islam doesn't teach that. وَرَفَعَ بَعْضَكُمْ فَوْقَ بَعْضٍ دَرَجَاتٍ. Allah says, I elevate some people's rank over others, that you might help each other. And لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ, and He tests you who's best in action. So you need the bin man, you need the doctor, you need the engineer. They can't all just be the same, and they can't be paid the same either. There's different qualities to different jobs. So Islam touches upon that, and Islam is very practical in that sense. It doesn't have any ideals of communism when it comes to dealing with human beings, on a political level. On the other hand, Islam does not view human beings as just spirit, right? Like extreme Sufis might just say, just focus on yourself, focus on purifying yourself. Just focus on praying, on elevating your soul to Allah, and there's nothing else apart from that. Now that's wrong as well. Islam doesn't teach spirituality. It has that aspect of it, but it's not the only one. Humans are not pure-minded, but integrated. They're physical. They have a mental. They have spiritual aspects. And as a whole, we work together. And that's why I don't know, your brother Saeed, I think, when you said I didn't find spirituality in Hizb al-Tahrir, unfortunately that's true. And Muslims, when it comes to groups, they focus on one aspect and they don't look at others. And Tabligh is the same. And they might focus on one aspect and they completely neglect another. So Islam is trying to bring the different aspects of the human being into life, into relevance, and not only focusing on one aspect. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they weren't all the same. Some of them focused on spirituality, some of them were scholars, like in Umar radiallahu anhu, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, and some of them were just mujahideen. They would go and fight in the way of Allah. Right, and they didn't memorize the Quran. Like Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu said, if it wasn't for jihad, I would have memorized the Quran. But so if we look at the lives of Sahaba, they had different aspects. Some of them flourished in something, and didn't flourish in other things. Ali radiallahu anhu could succeed in politics, but Ibn Umar said I couldn't. He didn't want to get involved when it came to fitness later on in Islam. So this is what I'm trying to say, that Islam is trying to tackle the mental, the physical, and the spiritual aspects of a human being. Okay? And so Islamic social order is based on the universal principle of human brotherhood and endeavors to secure. Islam wants happiness, it wants prosperity, it wants goodness for the individual, you, and as a society as a whole. Okay? There is absolutely no place for class war. So Islam doesn't teach that the poor is better than the rich, or the rich are better than the poor. It doesn't teach that, whether that's between individual societies, that the poor society is better than the rich society or otherwise. Okay, Islam doesn't. What can I ask you, brother? What does Islam base hierarchy on? It's not wealth or prosperity. What does Islam say? What makes somebody better than the other person? Taqwa. Yeah, good. Taqwa, conscious. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The highest of you in my eyes, Allah is saying, is the one who has more taqwa. And more taqwa, the higher you will be. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. And what frustrates me a bit about Western society is this: especially the liberals, the leftists, they want to blame their problems on the so-called 1% who own the vast majority of the wealth in the world. But in Islam, it doesn't actually see it that way at all. Okay, there should be a more better distribution of wealth, no doubt, but it's not stigmatizing being rich. The Prophet ﷺ could not help the poor without the money of the wealthy, of the Sahaba. So this view that some leftists have now, that the problem of the world are the rich people who've stolen the wealth and who've taken things and they don't want to distribute it, and they're unjust to those lower down in social hierarchy. This is not accurate in the Islamic sense. Okay? Wealth is given by Allah, and everyone's tested according to what they have. Okay? I hope I'm not making it too complicated. I'm trying to make it as fluid as possible. So yeah, this is just an introduction. In its social system, Islam is communal. Okay, prefers a social life. Can you, brothers, give me an example if I was going to use to prove as people being together rather than being individual? Is there an example you can think of? Where Islam encourages congregational work rather than somebody being by themselves? Yeah. So the praying Jama'at in congregation is 27 times greater in reward than praying individually. So Islam is trying to get people together. Okay, it's trying to build a society, a social group where they can be cohesive, where they can work together. Hajj, exactly. People go on Hajj, and it's a communal event. It's not just you there. It's 2 million other people. Yeah, it encourages marriage. You know, it encourages children. It encourages treating others fairly. Okay, it doesn't. The Prophet ﷺ said that the people who mix with others sacrifice in Eid al-Adha. What do you mean by that? While you type that up, so Islam is trying to bring people together. Okay. Yeah, I'll let you finish if you want to discuss. That's quite an interesting point. I don't know what you mean by that, but if you'd like to explain it to me, that's fine. So Islam is communal, meaning it prefers a social life. So the Prophet ﷺ said that people, the da'is to Allah, those who call to Allah, those who mix with people are better than the ones who choose solitude. Okay, and to face the harms of others is better, carries more reward than trying to live like a monk somewhere in the mountains. Okay. Although that's an option, but it's better to like, yeah. So Islam is encouraging, directly or indirectly, going and meeting others and fulfilling business obligations, being fair. These are things that I'm trying to express to you, brothers, that Islam is trying to build a society. Okay, and on top of that, then there has to be leadership, and how that leadership comes about, we'll find out. So it prefers a social life. Okay, demands worship in collective, in a way, in a collective sense. Congregation, okay, one direction, one center of Kaaba, fasting for 1 month at the same time, wherever you are, whether you're in New Zealand, Australia, Brazil, China, Britain, okay, or Saudi Arabia, you're fasting at the one time. So these are the same, and performing the pilgrimage to Mecca at the same time, one of the most principal duties of it. And it also places emphasis on strictly personal responsibility and does not forget the development of the individual. Okay, so okay, when groups of Muslims, they create a group, right, and they feel that this is the way to achieve the goals of the Sharia quicker and the best way. Like Jama'at Tabligh, I like to just mention them because I think everybody here would probably know who Jama'at Tabligh are. Yeah. So Jama'at Tabligh, for example, they would say, as connect yourself to the Creator, pray 5 times namaz, you do your tasbih, be good with your conduct with others, the mu'amalat, do the work of da'wah, sacrifice, be in the mosque all the time. They'll focus on a personal development, which is very good tarbiyah. Okay, but it neglects a lot of other aspects. Okay, so Islam in Sharia covers many aspects that groups like Jama'at Tabligh might get some and miss others. Okay, so Islam, it comes as a whole, but these groups, they try. You can't. I don't think any group can give Islam justice. Okay, so the best way, and I think this is why it works this way, is that different groups come and they focus on different aspects of Islam, whether that's personal development or development of the society as a whole. Okay, so it organizes all individuals into a single whole. Okay, so it develops a person spiritually, psychologically, physically, but it also, as a whole, works for the community. Okay, which is one of the amazing things about Islam. You know, it's a way of life. That's when we say that to non-Muslims, that's what we mean. Okay, personal and societal development. It is in this context that we must interpret the frequently stated view in Western languages that Islam is not only a religion, but also both a religion and a state in one. Okay, so obviously you don't tell non-Muslims that that Islam is a state. You know. Yeah, you don't do that, right? They'll run away from you and probably don't want to be Muslim. So you don't say Islam is a state, but what you do is you try and describe it in a way that Islam tackles the problems of an individual and it tackles the problem of the society. Is that clear? Am I rambling? Am I not explaining things properly? Am I being irrelevant? Give me feedbacks, brothers, so I can because you're here taking your time out, mashallah. I want to get to the point of what you want, okay? And this is my best effort in trying to get to that. But if you have any suggestions, just let me know. Okay. So Islamic law, okay, is sovereignty. So who dictates who rules? Okay, who dictates who rules? In this country, in Britain, you can argue the monarchy has sovereignty over its people. Okay. But in Islam, who has sovereignty? The state, or the ruler, or Allah? Who has sovereignty? We'll discuss this. Apologies about the long writing, but I need it to help me get all the points I want to mention. Okay. Islamic law declares that sovereignty belongs to God. It belongs to Allah, of course. Okay. Every Muslim should, I hope, when they're asked who is the ultimate lawgiver, they will say Allah. If they don't, then there might be an aqidah issue there. So he is a creator, and he is the legislator. Okay, he is the one that dictates what is right, what is wrong. Okay, and that's completely different to modern Western thought. Okay? They have a completely secular view about being humanists. If it benefits a human being, it's right. If it doesn't, it's wrong. For me, a very shallow understanding, because the ideas change, and then who has authority to tell you what's right and wrong? Okay, but for us as Muslims, Allah is we take from the Quran. Whatever it says is halal, we stick to it. But it says haram, we stay away from it, whether we understand it or not, because we believe Allah wants us for us. Okay, and He has authority. Okay, which is I think a very amazing point in Islam, that you don't have to worry about who rules over you. You know that you're dictated by a Lord that is ever seeing, ever hearing, and ever living. Okay, so you're not worried about creation too much. Yeah. The attributes of this sovereignty can be best ascertained from the Quran. Allah, so we can get this from the Quran. Okay, Allah many times mentions His sovereignty, and He mentions here He governs all affairs from the heavens and the earth. Okay, Allah says in the Quran, He governs all affairs in the heavens and the earth. And تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير. Blessed is He who in whose hand is the sovereignty, and He is over all things, has power. Okay. As in His command in another ayat of Quran, He says, say, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ. Say, Lord, sovereign of all sovereignty. You bestow sovereignty on whom you will. You give rulership to whom you will. And you take it away also from who you please. You exalt, you raise whoever you want, and you lower whoever you want. This is Surah Ali Imran. بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرِ. In your hand is all good. You have power over all things. Okay, you have power over all. So these are clear verses of the Quran where sovereignty is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like several others, these texts have in fact a direct bearing upon the political aspect. So from this we can derive political points. Okay, they're not just there to only for aqidah purposes. They're also there to remind us about politics and its relevance, and how we see politics as Muslims, which is a bit different maybe to how non-Muslims would view it. Okay, like several other texts, they have a direct bearing upon the political aspect. They have signified sovereignty as ultimate legal and governmental authority over the universe, life, and humanity. So Allah has ultimate authority over who? Over the universe, over human life, over all of mankind. Okay, so He is ultimately the sovereign of all things. And the Quran also declares that the Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is not above the law of Allah. Okay, even the Prophet is commanded to follow the Sharia. وَاتَّبِعْ مَا يُوحَى إِلَيْكَ مِنْ رَبِّكَ. Follow. Allah says in the final verse of Surah Yunus, follow what Allah has revealed to you. Okay. So even the Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is taught to follow what Allah has said. The Prophet is commanded accordingly. Say, I am but a man like yourself. إنما أنا بشر مثلكم يوحى إلي أنما إلهكم إله واحد. Say, I am but a man like yourselves. It is revealed to me that your God is one God. Okay. So the Prophet is saying, I am a human being. Okay, the greatest of all creation of Allah, but a human being. But it has been revealed to me that your God, your Lord, is one God. So he is teaching what Allah has taught him. So the ultimate sovereign, even if the rest of creation has no sovereignty, then it shows us how powerful this idea in Islam is. Okay, so this is how we explain it to non-Muslims, that we get our ideals from Allah, from the Creator, from who we believe is the Creator. Okay, we sent not a messenger but to be obeyed in accordance with every messenger was sent that he should obey Allah. This is part of our Aqidah of prophets. Anyway, they would never what Allah says, so this is quite clear. Okay, so Muslims don't have a written constitution like many countries do. Generally, our constitution is the Quran. Okay, so we have no written constitution to govern, agreed upon by, we don't have a book agreed upon 1.3 billion people other than the Quran. Okay, of different people. We're talking about 1.3 billion people, different ethnicities, different languages, okay, different cultural backgrounds. They however have in the Quran the unwritten constitution that is agreed upon by all Muslims and governs their daily life affairs to some extent without any law enforcement body. So in the UK, we won't say this is a Sharia ruled country. Nobody would say that. But there are things that Muslims in this country fulfill within the Sharia, which the state doesn't need to tell them to, or they're not in need of a state. This is also a reality. Now, not everything is needed by a ruler to implement. Muslims can get married. Muslims can get divorced. Muslims can go and pray in a mosque. They don't need. These are things that are taught by the Quran. They don't need another rule, another piece of law to teach them. Okay, so 1.3 billion Muslims, generally they can live their life with some commandments of the Sharia just based on their understanding of Quran without the need of rulership. And this is maybe something Hizb ut-Tahrir might want to look at. But they'll say not all of Sharia, and we're commanded to apply all of Sharia on earth because we are the Khalifat of Allah. Okay, but what I'm saying is there are many rules and rulings in Islam which you don't need a ruler or Khalifa to apply it, and that's the truth of it. In any particular Muslim state, Muslims could have their constitution written if they wished on the basis of the Quran. And I'm sure every Muslim country, well, I can think of one or two, maybe not, but overwhelming majority of constitutions in Muslim countries, they will say our constitution is the Quran. Okay, maybe Tunisia, I would say, wouldn't say that. Yeah, they probably say we're a secular country, but generally most Muslim countries will say the Quran is our constitution, and they'll have a written constitution also, but they'll say we're basing it on the usul of the Quran. Okay, until they do so, the Quran is a constitution establishing the concept of sovereignty and its relevant issues, as well as the rules that regulate the relationship between all members of the state, between Muslims and non-Muslim states. So in the Quran, there are, I wouldn't say vague in a negative sense. And the Quran doesn't cover every nitty gritty of life, of course, okay, but it covers the broad principles and principles to do with the individual, of the state, of a Muslim state, and relationship with non-Muslim states. It covers it generally. Okay, so we can take those principles and apply them today. And that's quite interesting because that leaves the door open for other rulings to come in place. But as long as they are cohesive to principles of the Quran, then they should be okay. You know, there's no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rules like that. Islam just bases it on general principles, and it's up to people and to Muslims to apply them as relevant to their time. Some scholars argue that governmental activity is restricted within the limits of the Sharia. Others will say no. Every single element of the state's actions should be based on Sharia law. But again, there are many things in the Sharia which are not found directly in the Quran. So it's down to human interpretation. Okay. So in either case, government in Islam acts only within the framework of these limitations. So ideally, every Muslim state should stay with the conditions and limitations of what the Quran prescribes. If the Quran prohibits something explicitly, they shouldn't be acting upon it. This principle is a Quranic order expressed in clear words and in positive terms of law, such as do this and do not do that. So the Quran gives, as I said, general principles of what is okay and what is not okay. So if it means good economic relations with other non-Muslim countries, that's fine. But if it touches being dependent upon them or having some sort of walayat, some sort of allegiance towards them, then that would be wrong. Okay, but I hope you understand, brothers, what I'm trying to say. Within, there's the devil's in the detail. The details have to be based on the broader soul of the Quran. The Quran does not touch specific rulings. In this respect, the Prophet ﷺ himself was not empowered to exceed or overstep these limits. So again, the Prophet ﷺ was taught to follow what Allah has revealed to him. And although I believe that he wouldn't go beyond what Allah said anyway, but just to make it clear to if any non-Muslims are listening, that even the Prophet is commanded to follow what Allah says. So no human being was given a legitimacy over Allah. And those that transgress the limits are ordained by Allah, those indeed are the unjust. This is a verse in the Quran. Okay, the verse in the Quran says, "These are the tilka hududullah. These are the limits of Allah. So do not transgress them. So فَلَا تَعْتَدُوهَا. Don't go beyond these limits." Allah is saying, these are the limits of Allah. Do not go beyond them. So this is a constitution. Okay, and وَمَن يَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَ اللَّهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Those who transgress the limits ordained by Allah, they are truly the ones who are being unjust in this matter. Okay? So in the light of these similar texts of the Quran, government in Islam is limited to what the Quran and Sunnah are saying. Okay, the Quran and Sunnah, the government in Islam should be based on these two things, the Quran and Sunnah. So one could argue that the Quran and Sunnah are the sources of fiqh. Okay, fiqh meaning the practices, individual practices of the Sharia, like praying, Hajj, and fasting. This matter will be detailed in maybe later on in the slides, but here it is sufficient to remember that fiqh is only a personal opinion concerning interpretations of the Sharia. So the idea of the madhabs, for example, are there to try and understand what the text is saying. And many of the things that are mentioned, not mentioned in the text directly, are just derived from the text, okay, indirectly. And that's why the difference of opinion happens. If things were so clear in the Quran and Sunnah, then we wouldn't have a difference of opinion. But we do, because many of the verses are vague, not negatively, but the hikmah of Allah, the wisdom of Allah is that He made them vague, He made them open to interpretation. Okay, and that facilitates many things. Muslims have agreed on the Sharia, but they do not agree wholly on fiqh. Okay, Sharia and fiqh are different. Sharia is what what the principles of the Islam are. Okay, fiqh are the nitty-gritty details that come after. So they're two different things. The Sharia, we have to have iman on the Sharia, but the fiqh not necessarily. You might not believe that you should go down in sajda with your knees. You might believe it's with your hands. but it doesn't make you a non-Muslim to believe that. That's just a different opinion. But if you were to believe cutting of the hands is not part of Islam or not part of Sharia, then you leave Islam, because this is a core belief, this is a core aspect of the Sharia. So there's a difference, I hope you understand, between fiqh and Sharia. The Sharia is the broad principles of Islam. Fiqh are the furu'i branches of Islam. The legal implication of this is that government in Islam is bound by a constitution that is divinely inspired, and that the Muslim community agrees that this is the case. Okay? So the difference between us and secularists is that we believe our laws should be dictated by divine will. Okay, Allah. The popular example is the hudud. When it comes to punishments of crime, Allah has already told us what the rules are. And let me ask you a question, brothers. Yeah. For example, if I was to say that that cutting of the hands is not relevant to the 21st century, to the 21st century, to the world of the 21st century, would I leave Islam? Would I still be a Muslim? If I was just to make that argument, we don't need to cut hands anymore because this is a different world we're living in, and more that cutting the hands is not practiced anymore. If I said that, would I be a Muslim? Would I still remain a Muslim? Why have I said? Why have I said it's part of Islam? Maybe that first question wasn't clear. If I say it's part of Islam, it's in the Quran, but I don't think it should be applied today, would I remain a Muslim? So, yeah, I want to hear what you think. Yeah, I'd like to hear your opinions. Nothing wrong with that. So I believe cutting of the hand, for example, is part of Islam, my belief. But I think I don't need to apply that, because if I do, then, for example, people run away from Islam. They won't think it's a peaceful religion. Would I still remain a Muslim? I would say okay, interesting. I would say as long as somebody believes that is the hukum of Allah, that Allah ordained that, it's in the Quran, then he remains a Muslim, because this is an aqidah issue. He believes in what's in the Quran. Okay? But if he says, I don't think it's relevant today because it will do more harm than good, I think we're falling into a fiqh aspect here. We're not falling into Shariat anymore. Because there are instances in Muslim history where even the Khulafa, like Umar radiallahu anhu, during the year of the drought, during his Khilafat, he suspended the cutting of the hand, because he said people are desperate to steal because they're hungry and they're in a very difficult situation. Okay, so I'll suspend that punishment. Umar radiallahu anhu didn't say I don't believe in it. He said I don't think it's relevant, because people are forced into this. I think as long as somebody believes that these are the ruling of Allah by default, but they do not wish to apply them because of some reason, then it wouldn't fall, for me, it wouldn't fall into a kufr at all. But it would maybe, if the reason is not good enough, maybe it becomes a sin. Okay, like the apostasy laws, which I might touch upon next week. But if somebody decides to leave Islam and you kill him, for many people that doesn't make sense anymore. You know, in a world where you can choose what you want to be, they'll say, you know, why should I be? Why is the religion so afraid of the people leaving it that it wants to kill them? Brother Mirza is saying this. Why is when people accept it? Yeah. I guess, yeah. So when the whole Sharia is applied, you can't just pick and choose which rule you want to apply or not. Yeah. I'm just using this example because I think it's relevant today. You know, they'll say to you, you know, Islam is a barbaric religion if you stone the adulteress. But you can say, you can say, look, today people view the world differently. It's a very metropolitan. Most countries now are just metropolitan people. There's a mixture of people, different religions, different cultures. So because at the end of the day, I want people to enter Islam. I don't want them to run away from it. You know, because if I'm sincere, I want guidance for people. And although I'm not going to deny that that's part of the Sharia that Allah wanted, I think in applying it today, it would cause more harm than good. I wouldn't say that's kufr at all. I would say that's, as long as it's done by obviously somebody who's qualified to do ijtihad in that aspect. And I think that the Azhar, for example, if you look at their fatwas, they do say that. And even Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya, I don't know if you guys brothers know him, he argues this as well. He says that many of these rulings will do more harm to Islam today than ever. But anyway, you'll get Muslims who differ. But it's an interesting argument. So therefore, government in Islam is not a kind of absolute government, right? Everything is dictated by the government. No, nor is it an autocracy or an authority. It's not a dictatorship either. There's different ways to rule. Okay, it is a government limited to our constitution. Okay, it's a government limited to our constitution. So it's not a dictator who can do whatever he wants. It's not somebody who's higher in status that he can dictate because he's richer than everyone else. No, it's limited to a constitution based in the Quran. So scholars of politics maintain that limitation of government power in regulating the affairs of the people is a great principle of the constitutional rule. Okay, so this is something which is helpful, you know, for human beings, that they don't have to worry about what's beneficial or not. If you already have a higher power telling you what's right and wrong, it's helpful, right? That's a great principle. The methods and the means which explain these limitations are called constitutional polity. Okay? In this sense, the Sharia is the constitution. Okay, so every Muslim country will say our constitution is the Sharia, is the hukum, the rule of Allah. But the explanations and methods that facilitate the application of the constitution are the constitutional polity. So there's two aspects: the pure constitution, which is the Quran, and applying this constitution, which is something else. Okay. And that's why I refer to this example of cutting the hands, whether if somebody decides not to apply it or not, is that a problem? Okay. So it signifies that the sovereignty belongs to Allah alone, again. Okay. However, Allah does not descend himself to govern. Allah does not calm down himself to govern people, right? He lets creation have some sort of free will, like we discussed last week. But the rules he has sent that. And the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and people, this is the Shia argument. They'll say, how did Allah, why did they say Ali radiallahu anhu should have been the Imam or the Khalifa after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because how could the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam pass away without directly appointing an Imam after him? They'll say that, and they'll say this is proof that logically he has to. But we say, as Sunnis, that the Prophet ﷺ, he brought a Sharia. He brought a Sharia. And he brought a way of life and a way of rule which has broad principles. And the Sahaba absorbed these broad principles and they applied them after he passed away, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's not that the Prophet ﷺ neglected it. It's not that Allah neglects, does not rule. No, Allah has, with the Quran, brought down certain rules which are very broad, which are very general, but it's up to us to apply them in our daily life. Okay. So this is what we say. So, however, Allah does not come down Himself to rule. No, He gave us broad principles, and these principles can be applied to time and place, which differ for different people. Okay. So here, the authority is the law, and the rule is but the rule of law. Okay. So the authority is the law. Okay. In Islam, administration and government exist to facilitate the application of law. The only reason in Islam for the existence of a government is to apply the rules of Allah on earth. And that's why we are called the Khalifa. إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I'm going to make somebody, Khalifa, a representative on earth. Okay, so Allah has brought down these laws, but it's up to government to apply them. It's not up to government in Islam to make up new laws, especially if they've been dictated directly. And if they've not been dictated directly, it's up to the government through scholars to derive the rulings for such and such cases. Okay. So on this basis, a number of scholars, including, have you brothers heard of Sayyid Qutb before? And they are of the view that the government derives its authority. Okay, it derives its authority not from the party or the people, but from the administrative activities which facilitate the application of the law. So what it's saying there is that the Sayyid Qutb argues, one of the great figures in Islamic politics in the 20th century. He was from the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay. And he had these ideas. He was a scholar as well, but he was then he was sentenced to death by the Egyptian government in the 50s because they didn't like which was a very secular government, so they didn't like what he was saying. But what he argues basically is the government should derive its authority. It doesn't have real authority; it's deriving it, and not because of the majority, which is the argument of democracy. Democracy is the rule of the majority, but Islam is suggesting no, it's the rule of Allah. This is how a Muslim government should work as. Okay, deriving the rules of Allah and applying them over a society, over a country. And this is again an argument that Hizb al-Tahrir, I don't know if you one of the brothers here who's known them, they'll obviously use this argument, okay, against democracy. They'll say democracy is about what the majority say will just follow the majority, but Islam says follow what the Quran Sunnah is saying. Okay, so there's a bit of conflict and contradiction there. But later on, I'll show, inshallah, that there's no. I don't think there is actually a contradiction with democracy in Islam, and I'll prove that. I'll try my best anyway. This limitation of government to the law makes the notion of theocracy inapplicable. So in Islam, there's no theocracy, there's no dictatorship, there's no hierarchy of who you are. Okay, there's always somebody higher than you. Okay, this is the point of Islam. There is somebody higher than you, and the problem with the West now is this idea that because we're human, atheism is taken over. So human beings are their own gods now, and they can dictate what's right and wrong. So if somebody wants to change genders, why not? It's his choice, his life. And this is wrong, because where do you? And Allah says, do not follow the steps of Shaitan. And once human beings make gods of themselves, this is what will happen. People, as people become more habitual, as people become more animalistic in their actions and their feelings, things will just become worse and worse. So they allowed homosexuality, which was in Britain illegal 50 years ago. They've allowed it to occur, and then transsexuality, which is a big thing now. If you brothers live in Britain, you'll know that. And gender binary now. Because who dictates what's what anymore? You see, who dictates what's what? But in Islam, we have a hierarchy of Allah that if we submit to that, then I know there's only male and female, and whatever you say, it can't change it. Brother Muhammad, you're going to say something? Yeah. It's a new issue, and I struggle to find anything on issues. You're right. It's a new issue, and as with everything else, unfortunately, with modern Muslims, you'll just have to wait a while until things become very serious, and then we'll start talking about it. The scholars did talk about a person called Mukhannath, somebody who's outwardly a man, for example, outwardly a woman, but he acts and he acts in a certain way which is the opposite gender. Okay, I have a friend who is facing this problem. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have. Very rarely do we have an answer. Even the modern, I would like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, I would say, is a very well-versed scholar. Somebody who's American as well, so he's these things are relevant to him, and he knows how to answer them with broad with Western principles as well. He struggles to. If we're going to base it on Western secularism, which has no God like Islam, modern anyway, they did have Christianity once upon a time, but not anymore. If you have extreme secularism like you have here or France, you can't argue against homosexuality. You can't argue against yeah. But you have to understand, on a secular point of view, gay marriage is okay, because if you want equality with everyone, then on secular principles, I guess you just have to accept it, because you want heterosexuals to get married, then why can't two consensual adults get married as well? On a secular level, you can't make an argument against it. If you want equality, a society that wants progressiveness, that wants people to be treated the same, I guess you have to give it. But for us, as Muslims, as we have an authority, like I'm trying to explain here, we have an authority over us who tells us that marriage is defined between a man and a woman. You can't. You try and be respectful to those people, and it's not about being disrespectful, but we have to just separate on this. Yeah, we have to separate on this issue, because I have I have principles. I have an authority over me, a constitution, right? A personal constitution, not even a governmental constitution, that tells me marriage is defined between a man and a woman. So I can't. And Muslims who are trying to bring sexuality in Islam, like some American da'is are. There's a woman I think called Sandra. What's her name? Sandra. She's originally Palestinian, but she's a da'i in America with hijab and all that. But she's standing up for the LGBT movement over there, as if Islam's teaching fairness. Apparently, again, this is Muslims going to another extreme of. You'll be surprised, brothers. When we hear the far right, I'll answer that in 1 second. When we hear the far right, the right-wing politics, and Muslims are scared of, they don't want anything to do with it. We have more in common with right-wing politics as Muslims of our belief than we do with the left. Right? We have more in common with right. But I would suggest you listen to right-wing politicians, right-wing speakers on YouTube. You'll find them who openly, in America, for example, openly speak against homosexuality, against the LGBT movement, against the indoctrination of children in schools for these and teaching them these ideas, and will end up confusing them. So there are non-Muslims who are actually on our side on this issue, many of them. Okay, it's the West. People unfortunately view the West as friendly Muslims because they've welcomed Muslims and they stand up for Muslim minorities in the West. So Muslims tend to align themselves with them. But actually, many of the things they believe are very contradictory to what we would teach. Okay, yeah, Brother Mirza's saying things. Why do homosexuals need to get married? Because marriage is an institution which has. Yeah, and this was what the church was arguing a year ago, or 2 years ago, when gay marriage was passed in Britain. They're saying, if you want to accept it on a secular, that's fine, but to bring them into our churches and to force us, and I think British law does not do that. I think if a priest does not want to marry 2 gay men or 2 gay women, then he doesn't have to. I think that the law still does exist. Thank God, because that would apply to Muslims as well if they did that. They would say, as an Imam, you should be marrying whoever wants to get married. Okay, so thankfully we're not in that situation. But again, the people who are pushing the agenda have no constitution. Their constitution is themselves, what they perceive is right and wrong. This is where the problem is. But for us, as I'm saying, we have a constitution, which is the Quran, which, by the consensus of the Ulama, prohibit homosexuality. So it's very difficult. To reach maybe a middle ground on this issue. But what I say when non-Muslims come, because I work in a mosque, when they come and ask me, when they come for da'wah tours, and they ask me what does Islam say about homosexuality, I think that the best answer to give to non-Muslims, to try and make them understand, and this is not diluting the religion, it's not making it less, but my advice to you, brothers, if you want to take it, Islam would not take into account, we don't believe God will take you into account for what you feel. If somebody is attracted to the same sex and feels love and compassion towards them in an intimate way, we don't say, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Sometimes that happens, and we don't believe, majority of Muslims would not believe, of scholars would not say that Allah will take you into account for those feelings. But to act upon it, and that's where the sin is. Okay, so I'll maybe try and explain it in that way. That might make sense. Like for a heterosexual man, if I'm attracted to an already married woman, okay, I'm attracted to her, but to act upon it and to have intercourse with her, that would be haram. Okay. So our point is, feelings, they might be uncontrolled, so Allah might not take us into account. But to act upon it physically, that's where the problem is. Okay. I might have a feeling that I want to steal that chocolate bar that's on the table, right? But if I don't act upon it, then I won't be taken into account. I think that's probably the best way in this issue. Yeah, scholars need to address in terms of modern. Yeah, we lack this. We're stuck in teaching books. Not a criticism of the Islamic course, but we're stuck in teaching books that are 1,000 years old, which still think slavery is relevant for some reason. But we need to move on. But we don't have that. People speak about Imam Ghazali and how great he was, but he was a mujaddid. He looked at things in his own time and tried to deal with them. Okay, he didn't leave the usul of his madhab. He used those usul to apply them in modern times. But we unfortunately, but you get maybe one or two, like Sheikh Yusuf Al-Qaradawi. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's a great scholar he wrote this Halal and Haram book, which is amazing application of modern ideas from an Islamic point of view. And I suggest you read from him if you want more ideas. Oh, that's a long comment. Oh, it's a link. Can't understand Urdu, unfortunately, but I see your point. Anyway, maybe we'll talk about homosexuality next week or something. That's really relevant. Not because I want to push it down the throats of people, but because they push it down our throats, right? So we have to have an answer somehow. Where was I? Yeah, so in Islamic state, the person or persons at the helm of affairs, the one ruling everything, are not regarded as a specific class divinely elevated or set aside from the common people. So they're not, the rulers should not be like that. Islam doesn't view them like that. They actually have a huge responsibility. They're not divinely inspired at all. Okay, they have to rule by what Allah has said. They do not rule in the place of God. This is important. But merely interpret and apply the law given to them by God. Okay, they merely interpret, and they apply this law. Okay? Laws which are available and known to all Muslims. All Muslims we're different. All of us know that we're not all the same, but there are things that we can all kind of agree with. They are special neither in themselves nor in the laws they interpret and apply. A very interesting point. Okay, rulers are not special at all in Islam. Okay, they're not special in themselves. They're just human beings who have a specific job to do, like other humans have other jobs to do. Okay, nor are they special because they interpret rules or anything. If they get it right, they'll get a reward. If not, if they're sincere, they might get one. If they get it right, they get two. So, do you understand? It's not be on all. Everything is being a ruler in Islam. No, definitely not. They have huge responsibility in applying these laws rather than anything else. They're not there to live a luxurious life or anything like that. Okay. Again, this is how the Shias, they say, because they'll argue. 1 second. Yeah, sorry. The Shias will say that the idea. I don't know if you brothers know the Shia theology, but it's worth mentioning. They obviously believe that wilaya and the imams is divinely inspired, and they are special in themselves, and they are ma'soom. So they would say that the rulers are special in themselves, okay, and they have divine knowledge and they have divine inspiration, which is one of the things they differ with us with. We don't believe that at all. Okay, we believe the Sharia finished when the Sharia finished on Arafah, on the day that the Prophet made Hajj, when Allah says, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. Today I have perfected your religion. So that was the last verse of rulership. Okay, last verse of fiqh in the Quran. Once that was revealed, that's it. There's no more inspiration after that. It's just deriving rulings, ahkam, after. But the Shias, they would say no. They would say that imams are divinely inspired, and they are inheritors of the Prophet, although they see them as higher. And when they rule by divine inspiration. So that's what they would say. Right. So to just sum up on the constitution part, okay, the above discussion, what I've just mentioned, they clarified 4 points. First off, that the system of government in Islam is evidently compatible with democracy, okay, which I do believe, because there's no set boundary in Islam. As long as the ruler is applying the rules of Allah, how he got there, how he's chosen, is not specific to as I said, the Prophet ﷺ did not give any specific way, any specific direct indication who should rule after him. Although he did give indirect, we believe, indications of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Okay, so there's nothing for me that contradicts democracy in Islam. If you're talking about the majority choosing their ruler, as long as that ruler is applying the rules of Allah, I don't see how people can argue against that. As long as he's making it clear that when he's standing for an election, that I want the hukm of Allah to be represented, but I want this and this and this, which don't contradict Allah's rulings. You know, how could you say that's against Islam? The man is saying, I'm going to apply the rule of Allah, but there's so many aspects that you can talk about. I'm going to invest more in the health service. You know, people don't ever talk about the health service or the education system when it comes to Sharia. It's just cutting hands and stoning people to death. You know, it's not about providing good roads. It's not about providing the best schools. It's not about providing the best economy for your people. And people don't mention that at all. But that's what Sharia is. That's why Islam, as I mentioned, Islam wants happiness and prosperity for people. Okay, so if somebody's arguing that and he's standing for an election, everybody else is arguing the same thing, but who's going to apply it better, and people get to choose. Unless you brothers think differently, I don't think that's. Anyway, it's open to interpretation. People, if I get people Hizb Tahrir in this room now, they'll probably, I don't know what they'll say about me. Okay. And both systems contain substantial elements of similarity. There's similar ways. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, how was he chosen? In the hut when all the Ansar were gathered, and they were gathered there, and then they spoke for a long time, and then Umar radiallahu anh made his case for Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. And then they all went, okay, we choose you. That a majority said, okay, we know that it's supposed to be you. So a majority of at least some sort of number said that you should rule over us. Okay. Now to say that the rest of the nation, where's your proof for that? But anyway, open to discussion. Sorry, that got cut off. Yeah. Guys, if you differ with me, please say something. Yeah, I like discussion. I like different opinions. I'm not somebody who thinks this is my way. This is my opinion. Okay. Government in Islam is constitutional. Okay. Government in Islam are constitutional. They have a constitution, which is the Quran. We can also conclude that Islamic government is not theocratic or autocratic. Okay. Changes in the form of government will not change the Islamic identity of the state. Okay, as long as the government facilitates the ordinance of the law. So if governments change, the country doesn't change because the constitution is the same. That's the point. Okay, that's what we derived from that first point. So in Islam, what's the function of the state? What's the state? What's its responsibility? In Islam, the state is not an end in itself, but only a means to facilitate the interpretation and application of the rules of Allah. Okay, that is to make sure that justice is applied, to make sure that there's equality amongst all people, there's freedoms. Okay, so the government in Islam is a means to an end. It's not the end itself. In the Islamic state, God is the ultimate source of governmental and legal authority. In the Islamic state, ultimately, it is the rule of Allah that should rule over all other rules. Okay? It takes precedence. So in other words, the Sharia is the foundation of legislation. Thus, government in Islam is specifically designed to implement the law, that is, to govern with justice. Okay, so the reason for the government in Islam is to make sure there is justice in the country. As long as there's justice, that society will flourish. If there's injustices, then things go wrong. Okay, and Allah's wrath can come upon that nation. There is no place in the Islamic system for arbitrary rule by a single individual or a group, because there is always room for there's always room for shura, mashwara. In Islam, there's no such thing as what I say goes, and there's no other opinion, and there's no thing as whatever me and my mates think, that's what's going to happen, and there's nothing else. No, there is a shura element to it. Okay. Based on a consensus of Muslims, the rule of Allah will be implemented by implementing His law. By proving we're Muslims, how we do that is by implementing the rules of Allah. This is what Muslims have agreed upon. Okay, we agree upon with this. God's wisdom did not empower anybody, or even the Prophet to legislate for the people as he wishes, or govern them on the basis of his own authority. Okay. God made power for himself. He made the rules for himself. He didn't give anybody else permission to make up new rules, new laws to govern others. So the political theory in Islam is based on the Shahada, La ilaha illallah. There's one God, okay, and He is above everything else. This is an important point. Therefore, the one who confesses that divinity belongs to none but Allah, and thereby confesses that sovereignty in human life, the political theory belongs to God alone. Very simple. If you believe Allah is one, He is a creator, the one who owns everything, then He owns all of His creation, and His creation are obliged to follow what He says. And as a ruler, you have to just apply the rules of Allah on them, because you do not own them. If Allah owns them, then He alone owns them. Then it's His politics that goes ahead, not yours. Okay. And God exercises sovereignty in human life, on the one hand by directly controlling human affairs by His will, and on the other hand by establishing the fundamental order of human life, like human rights, duties, relationship, and mutual obligation by His law and His program. So Allah directly controls human beings. He has that aspect of creating those actions, and Allah also does talk about human life, human rights, duties, okay, relationships, and how to make those relationships work, whether that's with a family or friends, and how to talk to people, how to speak to others. So Allah is facilitating all these laws for us. So anybody who basically says that there is another ruler other than Allah, then he is committing some sort of shirk if he means by that that there are rules that should be applied above the rule of Allah, and the rule of Allah is not true, and that just falls into shirk. And that's what probably Hizb al-Tahrir would argue, that they would say that democracy is shirk, wouldn't they? I mean, they would say, that's what ISIS would say. And Hizb al-Tahrir, of course, are very different. But ISIS might say the democracies are mushriks because they compare their rule to the rule of Allah. So, and they're challenging Allah for His rule, and that's shirk. You're putting yourself as a deity, as a god with Allah in that sense. So these essential principles are rightly based on many verses of the Quran, which I mentioned earlier. So in the early period of the Muslim community, the Prophet ﷺ, his leadership, it provided authority, and according to the circumstances of his time. For his successors, the Prophet ﷺ, when he passed away, it didn't mean that Allah passes away. It doesn't mean that the rules of Allah are gone. No, they still remain. In the sphere of their competence, they became so the Sahaba, they became the successors of the Messenger ﷺ. But for them, there was no possibility of receiving divine revelations. Hence, the power in the matter of revelation was restricted. So they weren't they're the Sahaba, but they're not prophets. They're not divinely inspired. So they didn't have support in that way. But as I said, the Prophet ﷺ left them with those principles that they would act upon. Okay, he didn't leave them alone in any way. And again, the Shias will say the Imams should have been starting with Ali radiallahu anh. He should have been the Imam, and he would have been divinely inspired as an Imam. Okay, but we disagree. Hence, the matter of specifically, they have no authority to abrogate the Sharia. And this is where we differ with the Shias, I guess, again. They say because they're ma'soom, the Imams, and they're divinely inspired, that leaves a big danger. An Imam comes along, and then he says, let's wipe away this rule. Let's take it away. No, Allah told me that the rule is something else. Where does it stop? For us, when the Prophet passed away, the Sharia stopped. Okay, so Alhamdulillah, the Sharia is complete. Its principles are there, but the rulings they are derived from those principles. Do you brothers understand when I say they're derived from principles? Do you? Okay. Cool. So the Sharia, however, gives them the right to interpret it. Okay, so right to interpret, right to derive, and they can remove some of these laws if they feel they're not applicable at that specific time. But they don't remove it from the Sharia; they just don't apply it at that time. So that's why, when people say they use the ayah in the Quran, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. Those who do not rule by the rules of Allah, they are kafir. Again, there's and ISIS used that. Extreme groups like that who want to implement the Sharia. They say that any ruler who does not apply the rules of Allah, then he is a kafir. And we say, as mainstream Sunni Muslims, what this verse means is the ruler who intentionally chooses not to rule by the hukm of Allah, intentionally does not rule by a thing, then it becomes a problem. Yeah. But if a ruler does not apply it, but he believes in it, then he just becomes a sinner. Okay. Okay. I think I'll finish the functions of a state, and then we'll conclude, inshallah. So in the modern terminology of constitutional theory, the first Khalifa was the chief executive. Okay, he was the highest. He everything went through him. Okay, he was entrusted with the administration of the affairs of the community, political, economic, security, and others. So once that Khalifa took charge, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he had control over the affairs of so many things. Community, the political states of Medina was under his hands. The economy of Medina was under his control. Security, others were all under his responsibility. The circumstances of the time, the first four successors necessitated the establishment of two institutions. So this is now an example of how from Sharia principles, and the Khalifas would derive new rulings. Okay, so they're not new rulings meaning they contradict the rule of Allah. No, they're new rulings that come from understanding what the rule of Allah is. Okay, so there's two institutions that were established from these rules. The police force to maintain internal law and order. So the Khulafa, they made a new police force that would check, that would go around Medina, patrolling Medina. Now that could be derived from a verse like, "Do not steal." Right? That's or do not act unjustly. So you can say, I'm going to put these police officers to make sure that people don't do those haram things. Now, Allah didn't say put police officers on the ground. That's what ISIS will say. So you can't have a police. You can't have traffic lights because these are not the hukm of Allah. No, the traffic lights need to be put because Allah says that human life is sanctified. Allah says whoever kills one soul, it's as if he's killed all of humanity. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا نَفْسًا. Don't take away the life of anyone. Right? Now, from that simple, broad rule, do not kill, we can say, let's put traffic lights on the road, because that will help maintain the road, that will help maintain car traffic, so people don't bump into each other. Is that clear? So you have a principle there, don't kill, and from that you can derive many, many rulings. Okay, and that's what the Khulafa did. They put a police force, and they established a professional army to maintain security from external threat. Okay, so the Prophet didn't have an army in that sense. The Sahaba just, whenever he was going for expedition, they would just join him. But the Khulafa, I think Umar specifically, he made an army, and he made a wage for them, and he even checked how long they should go out for, and then he asked the women of Medina, how long can you stay without your husband? And they said 4 months. And so nobody can go for longer than 3 months out of Medina. Okay, so these are not they're not revealed in the Quran, but the Quran speaks about protecting others. Allah speaks about protecting the human soul. Allah speaks about security. Allah speaks. He says that security of a nation is a blessing. One of the things Allah punishes a country by is فَأَذَاقَهَا اللَّهُ لِبَاسَ الْجُوعِ وَالْخَوْفِ. Allah put a fear amongst its people as one of the punishments of one of the cities Allah speaks about. So fear and insecurity is actually is not a positive thing in the Quran, it's a negative thing. So from that, we can say that to put an army outside of Medina to protect people and to make them feel safe is from the hukm of Allah. Yeah? So that's how beautiful this religion is. It kept it. Allah has kept it very open, very general. So we're not limited to a time or place with the Quran. The Quran speaks very generally, and we can apply it anywhere, whether that's in 2019 or 2050. And one of the things that Christianity is why it's fallen, because it doesn't have any relevance anymore. It doesn't have what we have. Okay, the Bible and the Torah for Jews specific: do this, 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 this. Don't do. And Allah says that one of the things about the Prophet, he came to make things easy because they were so difficult. And that's why religion loses relevance because of Christianity and Judaism, not because of Islam. Islam puts general principles there that you can apply anywhere, okay? Which is, I think, we should be very happy with and really teach others about it. We shouldn't keep it to ourselves. So the first four Khalifas, they also exercised judicial law, okay? But in doing so, they consulted learned individuals. So they made judges, okay? Allah, why? Does Allah say make judges? No, Allah says, يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ. Allah orders justice. So the Khulafa, they brought judges, they brought experts to deal with problems of people between themselves and whatever. Okay. So with the passage of time, the Khulafa delegated their judicial functions to eminent judges. So instead of them judging all the time, because the Muslim community was growing, you can't give 5 minutes to everyone, and it doesn't take 5 minutes anyway to solve some of these problems. So what the Khulafa did, they established judges that were full-time job was to judge between people, and they were learned people. Okay. Now, again, the Quran doesn't say that, but it's derived. They were respected by the Khulafa, and who usually acted independently. Again, this is an amazing thing. From early on in Islam, judges tend to be independent, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, if you see a scholar in the castle of a ruler, then stay away from him. Or the Muslims throughout history have always been careful about the scholar mixing with the ruler, because they know the ruler has never got Islam in his interest. So in short, the main objective of the executive, the Khalifa, legislator, or the judge, was to facilitate the application of Islamic law so as to administer complete justice and equality among all people. So the main purpose of these positions is to bring the rule of Allah into life, okay? And to bring justice and equality amongst people. This is why judges and rulers exist. Nothing else. Not to make them feel special, not for their own honor. No, it's just to apply. It should be just to apply the rule of Allah. Ensuring freedom of all types and forms, including freedom of religion. Okay, this is again, Islam teaches freedom of religion. La ikraha fi din. So don't let anyone tell you that Islam forces anyone to enter it, nor does it kill anyone it goes out of it. The apostasy laws, I think, were there. I believe, just by reading, is that early on, a Muslim could be killed for leaving Islam, because by leaving Islam, it was understood that he would leave and the state, and that was treason. Okay, that doesn't exist anymore. I don't think. We live in a free world where you can live in Saudi Arabia but still not be a Muslim. It doesn't. Anyway, that's my opinion on it. Yeah. So freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and Allah says, "La ikraha fi din." There's no compulsion in religion. فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Allah says, whoever wants to believe, let him believe. Who wants to disbelieve, let him disbelieve. لَكُمْ دِينَكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. That's what the Quran is saying. The Quran is saying, you choose. You do what you want. But there will come a day of judgment, and you'll just have to face the consequences of what you believe. But in this life, do what you want. If يَعْمَلُوا مَا شِئْتُمْ, you do whatever you want. Okay? And also the role of the leader in Islam is to ensure security from internal and external threats. Okay, he has a responsibility to protect his people. Okay, that's, I think I've spoken enough. The next topic is about mashwara, so I'll leave that maybe for next time, inshallah. Okay, any questions, brothers? Anything you want me to cover that I haven't covered? And what do you think? What did you think of the course today? Was it beneficial? These brothers can also, I don't know if you have contact with Mufti Mufti Tosir. So please give him the feedbacks. Text him feedbacks, please, so he knows as well. So if you do that for me, that would be helpful. Just your feedbacks on the course to him, and would you do that, please? Yeah. Okay. Oh yes, sorry. Wait, let me check if I have your email very quickly. 1 second. Two, 3. Gmail. Okay. Inshallah. As I said, just send your feedback to Mufti Sab for me, please. Whether that's good or bad. Jazakallah khair. And hopefully I'll see you next week for a final session. Okay? Jazakallah. Thank you. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.